Tonight, repatriated with dignity.
Because we didn't want him alone being shipped in a box like an Amazon package.
The remains of a Saskatchewan man who died fighting in Ukraine finally make it home to his family. Also, Premier Scott Moe sits down to reflect on the year that was.
People in community after community that have literally opened their own home to support people.
Plus, Olympian Mark McMorris returns home to Saskatchewan on the Burton Mystery Series World Tour.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Monday, December 19th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The remains of a Saskatchewan veteran who died volunteering in Ukraine are now back home with his family. But it took a lot to make that happen. His family says they struggled without help from Ottawa. 33-year-old Joseph Hildebrand left his home near Herbert in June to help Ukraine fight the Russian invasion. Hildebrand had military experience. He served in Afghanistan with the Canadian Armed Forces. But this trip to Ukraine was not sanctioned by Ottawa. Hildebrand was paid to fight by a group called the International Legion of Defense of Ukraine. He died on the front lines November 7th. We first brought you his story when his family learned of his death. Our reporter Sam Sampson has been following their struggle to get his remains back to Canada. Sam, what was the biggest challenge?
Well, normally when a Canadian dies in active duty, there are a lot of ceremonies to bring the body back to Canada, and those are led by the military. But the thing was, Hildebrand was a volunteer. He wasn't really there fighting for Canada. He volunteered to go. And so when he died, Ukraine was in control of what happened next. So the original plan, Sam, was to ship back his ashes to Canada. But Hildebrand's family and friends weren't really comfortable with that option. Another Canadian veteran, Steve Kersnick, explains why.
It's not that we're asking for a lot. We wanted to have someone repatriate Joseph home because we didn't want him alone being shipped in a box like an Amazon package. Like, to me, that was unacceptable. To his partner, to his daughter, that was unacceptable.
So Sam, what did they do?
So Steve Kersnick teamed up with Carissa Hildebrand, which is Joseph Hildebrand's partner, and they wanted to get an escort to bring the remains back to Canada. They wanted to somehow mark his time as a veteran, and that's kind of a way that they wanted to do it. But there was a problem with that plan, and they had to negotiate for weeks with Ukrainian and Canadian officials to make that happen.
Some Canadians may choose to take more active steps.
Canada warned people not to go to Ukraine. There wasn't much the government could do if the worst happened.
And I got a call and it said Ukraine. And I just instantly kind of knew, if that makes sense. It was like, oh no. That would be his old military tags.
If it had been left up to Ukraine, this repatriation process would have taken a couple months. Instead, it took about a month. But Hildebrand's partner doesn't want other families to go through this at all.
I want to open people's eyes to what happens to a volunteer that goes to fight for a different country and how difficult it is. I need to open that a little bit of that political eye stuff with both Canadian and Ukrainian right now, because this is going to go on for a while. So I don't want other families to have to deal with what I just did. Truly, there needs to be better protocols and help and support.
The family plans to spread Hildebrand's ashes on land near his farm by Herbert.
Thanks so much for bringing this to us, Sam. You can watch Sam's story tonight on The National. Well, we quickly went from warmer and snowy to snowy and very cold. Tracking the system is our weather specialist, Ethan Williams. Ethan?
Yeah, and to trace the origins of this cold, Sam, you actually have to go about halfway around the world to Russia. This is where it originated. A small community, Oymyakon, Russia, hit minus 61 degrees last Monday, and that not going to get that cold here, but that cold air is coming from that direction. It's basically because of this ridge that's built in to the upper atmosphere and this high pressure at the surface keeping it in place. That cold weather essentially tracking over top of that ridge, over top of the North Pole, and spilling into Canada and the United States. And now the jet stream has dropped very far south, to as far south as the panhandle of Texas, and it's just going to keep dropping as we go through the rest of the week here. This low pressure going to be triggering off a snowstorm that will impact portions of eastern Canada, but for us it should remain mainly clear. The jet stream usually not getting as low as the Gulf of Mexico, but that Arctic air is certainly seeping that far south. And just how cold is it going to get, Sam? I'll have more details coming up a bit later.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The city of Saskatoon has the green light to buy more properties around a proposed downtown arena site. Council had its final meeting of the year today and voted unanimously to spend another $17 million on 3 properties. The money's coming from a city reserve fund. It will spend nearly $7 million to buy a former bus depot across the street from the proposed arena location. The city also plans to scoop up 2 nearby office buildings for $10 million. Since the properties were not for sale, the city is paying more than the appraised value for all 3. The land purchases come before council has given its final approval to the downtown arena project.
Once council formally approves the project, we expect land in and around the project to increase. So by getting these properties now, likely results in the best value for the city and the project.
Also today, council approved a carbon charge increase on Saskatoon light and power rates. Starting January 1st, the average residential user will pay about $2.50 more per month. It follows a similar increase announced by Sask Power this month. As you're getting ready for holiday gatherings, you're being asked to think about what may end up in the landfill after those festivities. The request was made this afternoon at the Sarcan processing plant in Saskatoon.
Holiday season typically waste, maybe doubles. A lot of communities that have garbage every 2 weeks pickup switch to 1 week over the holiday season because it's too much for them to handle otherwise. So that's an indication that we have a lot of progress that we could make in reducing waste for the holidays.
People are encouraged to reduce their waste through recycling and composting, and to consider low or no waste decorating, gift giving and wrapping. Things like reusable bags or towels are options for wrapping, and if old electronics are replaced by gifts, that the old ones end up regifted or recycled instead of at the dump. According to the government, about half of the items that still end up in landfills could be diverted through other recycling programs. Some fishermen in northern Saskatchewan are celebrating a record harvest and profits from a fish they once threw away. Tulubi, also known as Cisco, isn't normally a big seller because the fish is known to be tough. But there's high demand for Tulubi eggs in northern Europe, where it's used to make caviar. So this year, 14 fishermen at Pinehouse Lake tripled their harvest. Together, they earned nearly $800,000, and that's from just 2 weeks of fishing. Now, the Ministry of Environment says it will work with fishermen to figure out how much the lake can handle.
Looking at the sustainability of it to make sure that that is sustainable, and that if there are changes that need to be made, or if we need to put a cap or a quota on the amount of Cisco that can come out in the fall, we'd be looking at implementing that just to ensure that the fishery on all the species is not affected by this new Cisco fishery.
This is just a great story. We've been able to take that Tulubi, and we found a market for it for the product, and it's a good news story.
Local fishermen say the growing demand for Tulubi eggs could save their commercial fishing industry. Well, the countdown to Christmas is on, and the sidewalks of downtown Regina are full of bundled up people working their last couple of days, and also people gathering last-minute gifts. So what does Mother Nature have in store as we get closer to the first official day of winter? Ethan will have the details in his forecast after the break. Stay with us. International negotiators have finalized an agreement at COP15, the UN Biodiversity Summit in Montreal.
First of all, is the message that we need to Stop taking nature for granted. Stop a delusional idea that we can continue to use nature's services and resources unsustainably without consequences.
The countries gathered at the summit agreed to 4 goals and 23 targets. That includes protecting 30% of the world's land, water, and marine areas by 2030. Billions of dollars have been pledged toward funding global projects to protect the planet's biodiversity. There's also promise to reduce subsidies considered harmful to nature by at least $500 billion by 2030. The United Nations says 3/4 of the world's land has been altered by human activities. 1 million species are expected to face extinction this century.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. 22 model clear out is on now.
And weather specialist Ethan Williams is back. Before the break, you were talking about just how cold it's going to get, and I'm afraid to ask.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid I've got some not so great answers for you on that, Sam, but it will be fairly short-lived. That is the good news. But in the meantime, we do have an extreme cold warning now for all of southern Saskatchewan, portions of west central Saskatchewan included now, including Kindersley, Rosetown, and the city of Lloydminster. And all of us below the minus 20-degree mark right now. And really where we're seeing it is the western portions of the province where that cold air is seeping in. Close to minus 30 in a lot of locations on the west side of the province. A little bit better, but not by much on the eastern side. And wind chills really telling the story here because we don't have a lot of wind. And, you know, it's only 6:15 or so here. And we're at minus 44 already with the wind chill in places like Kindersley and Leader. A little bit less so in eastern Saskatchewan, and that's because we've had a little bit of snowfall and some cloud cover in that portion of the province today, but that's quickly dissipating, and that's going to allow for that cold air to move eastward through the night tonight. A little bit of snow still possible in the parklands in southeastern Saskatchewan before it moves into central portions tonight, but it's not going to be much, maybe just a few flurries. Much of the northern half of the province going to be seeing cloud cover. We are going to be clearing out in southern Saskatchewan. Tomorrow, look for a mix of sun and cloud in the southern half, mostly cloudy in the northern half of the province. Tomorrow night into early Wednesday morning, we are watching the beginnings of a low pressure system. This is what's going to be affecting eastern Canada later in the week, and it could bring a couple of centimeters of snow to places like Assiniboia, Gravelbourg, Val-Marie, even Estevan, right along that southern border of the province before high pressure takes hold as we head into Wednesday, and that's going to be keeping us cold for these next few days. When you wake up tomorrow morning, yes, it is still going to be very cold and brutally so, especially southwestern Saskatchewan. They're going to bear the brunt around Val-Marie and the Cypress Hills area into the mid-minus 30s. Wind chills going to be likely into the mid-minus 40s and a little bit warmer as you go north and east from there. Now, the good news is with high pressure moving in, that means that wind gusts aren't going to be much of a factor. And in fact, we really won't see any wind until about Wednesday afternoon. That's when we'll see some gusts close to 40 in southwestern Saskatchewan. And with just a little bit of that wind, we are going to see those wind chills start to pick up. Again, tonight, frostbite possible in just minutes in southwestern Saskatchewan. And even through the day tomorrow, it's probably good plan to not have any outdoor activities planned because we're going to see wind chills well into the minus 30s throughout the day. And our warm-up really doesn't come until the weekend, and it will be pretty substantial, though. Regina over these next few days, wind chills into the minus 30s, mostly cloudy conditions. We do get some clearing for Friday. For Christmas Day, we are actually looking at a little bit of snowfall to give it a nice Christmassy feel, but it will still be a little bit on the cold side, just below average for where we should be this time of year. And in Saskatoon, we are looking for similar temperatures again tomorrow. Mix of sun and cloud, minus 26. We'll see a little bit of that increase in cloud cover on Wednesday before we start to clear out. And then those overnight lows finally start to pull out of the deep freeze. So a Christmas miracle, perhaps, Sam, that it'll be just a touch warmer.
Let's cross all the fingers and toes.
Exactly.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
It's the annual Gingerbread House contest in Sweden, held fittingly at Stockholm's Museum of Architecture and Design. The hall was turned into a gingerbread subdivision. Some of the constructions harken back to Europe's past. Others struck a more modern look, way over my skill level for sure. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. The clock is winding down on 2022, and Saskatchewan's premier is reflecting on the year it's been. Our legislative reporter Adam Hunter sat down with Premier Scott Moe. Here's some of their conversation.
Premier, thanks for joining me. I want to know when you think back on 2022, what will stand out to you about the work your government's done?
Well, I think there's a number of things that occurred, throughout 2022, and first. We came into some very choppy waters, like other provinces and like other regions around the world. And the fact that we were still in the midst of, very much in the midst of a global pandemic as we entered 2022. As we find our way through the year, Saskatchewan most certainly is in a much stronger position when you look at the investments that have landed in Saskatchewan. The financial situation of the province in general. We were able to start to pay down some of that pandemic debt that we had acquired over the last couple of years. But what would really stand out to me, I think, is Saskatchewan people in general. The government was a small part of this, but Saskatchewan people in general, the generosity that they have shown in receiving, hosting, volunteering, and supporting folks from all over the world, but in particular those folks from the war-torn area of Ukraine due to the Russian invasion that has occurred there. We've been a part of that as government, arranging for some flights with an international charity, but it most certainly is people in community after community that have literally opened their own home to support people. And we have a very strong Ukrainian heritage in this province. I think about 17% of residents would trace their roots back to the Ukraine, came here over the course of the last 100 years, and I think in a large part have been part of building this province over the last century. And so I think what I would be most proud of this past year is what Saskatchewan people have done in supporting our friends and family from another country in a time of distress.
What did you learn from the fallout, I guess, of the invitation of Colin Thatcher to the legislature?
Well, I learned it was a mistake, but a mistake made by a government member, and so most certainly, if I would have done anything differently in that case, I should have. As I said, we don't vet lists of MLAs that they invite, but if there's anything that I should have done differently, I most certainly should have been out sooner on behalf of the government to say that this was wrong and it shouldn't have occurred.
With the tragedy at James Smith Cree Nation, you talked about Indigenous police forces, and you just talked about high rates of domestic violence in the province. What's the government doing in response to that specific incident, if anything?
Well, a number of things I think we're already in motion, and I think we probably have to look at expanding. Policing we talked about, expanding the opportunities for community-based policing in Indigenous communities, expanding the support that our municipal, our RCMP officers are getting through the Saskatchewan Marshals Service. And the challenge we have, in drug-fueled property crime, let's call it what it is a challenge not just in Indigenous communities, not just in rural communities. It's a challenge across our province and in many cases across our nation. And so the one side is enforcement of the laws that we have. That's why we brought in the warrant enforcement suppression team. That's why we are going to be making the investments that we are. The second challenge is we need to provide the supports for people that when they make a choice, they may have entered a lifestyle of drug addiction, and when they make a choice that they want to take a path to a better life, we need to have the services available for them. We need to have an open detoxification bed. We need to have an open intensive rehabilitation bed, a bed that is going to find them through a much more serious addiction than maybe a 28-day alcohol rehabilitation program. And so we have made the commitment to work with our community-based organizations across the province to open up 150 intensive rehabilitation beds. That likely isn't going to be enough moving forward. I'm quite certain it won't. We're going to need more to provide more opportunities for those folks that, when they do make that decision, we have the services available for them. We also need better intake. When people make that decision, they need to know that if they go here, they are going to find a medical health professional that they ultimately need. And that's part of what our urgent care center is about. Part of those, the service they offer will be about alleviating some of the pressures in our emergency rooms, so very likely high volume focus. areas, and there's going to be another intake in those structures where if you are having a mental health crisis, if you have found yourself in a life with a drug addiction, if you go in there, we want to be able to take you by the hand and ensure that you get in front of the correct medical health professional, and we have those services to offer. And so we need better intakes, and the urgent care centers are likely an initial step into that better intake world.
And Ethan is back with one last look at tonight's weather.
And in case you've missed it the past few times, it is going to be cold. In Regina tonight at midnight, we're going to be at -25. The wind chill already dropping into the -30s. Reminder that extreme cold warning is in effect for Regina tonight. And as we get into tomorrow morning, you'll see why. Wind chill still going to be at -39 as you head out the door or you're getting the kids ready. Partly cloudy conditions going to be lingering through the day, and temperature really not going to be improving all that much. We'll probably get to around -26, but the wind chill still between -35, -40. Saskatoon, a little more cloud cover tonight. You're not under the extreme cold warning, but temperatures still not going to be pleasant at all. By tomorrow morning, wind chill close to -38, temperature close to -29. We will finally get a little bit of clearing as we head to the noon hour, but the temperature not going to really budge all that much. We're probably going to be topping out around -27, so a good day to have lots of layers on, Sam.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And before we leave you tonight, the pride of Saskatchewan when it comes to snowboarding was back in his home province over the weekend. Mark McMorris was in Saskatoon promoting snowboarding as part of the Burton Mystery Series worldwide tour.
Just a quick walk to the top.
It's so exciting to actually have something of this magnitude here in Saskatchewan, and I'd say it's about time. This is a super grassroots approach, just like I had, and that's the main goal is accessibility and like bringing that sort of skate park feel to a local snowboard hill and putting some resources into it and making it easy for kids to come after school and fine-tune their skills. So I learned on a very small slope myself, and this is plenty big enough to learn the fundamentals of the sport. Yeah, just trying to spend time with the youth and the kids that are looking up to me. I know if a pro snowboarder showed up at my local hill as a kid, I probably would have had a conniption. So it's absolutely mind-boggling that I can bring 3 other pros from Burton and come to Saskatoon and have a session, and like these kids seem over the top. So I'm looking forward to spending time with them and doing some runs. I'm a winter sports athlete, so I see it all, but nothing really hits like a -20 in Saskatchewan with a little bit of windshield. It's definitely a brisk day today, but I heard it's getting even colder, so I'm glad we landed on this weekend. And I mean, we're so accustomed to it. People are out here smiling, and the weather is just a part of it. That's why they make good gear.
And accustomed to it we are. That is it for us tonight. For News Anytime, you can always head to cbc.ca/Sask or Saskatoon, or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. Glenn, Reed, and Ethan will be back with more local news and weather tonight at 11. Thanks for watching, and have a great night. Stay warm.